Hello, dear viewers. It is our pleasure to welcome you to this edition of the news in English. My name is Sarishan Hore. Let us begin with the headlines. Rwanda's president and the UK's prime minister have met and agreed that a political solution must be found for the conflict in the eastern DRC. The Genocide Survivors Umbrella Organization, Ibuka, as well as researchers on the genocide against the Tutsi, have denounced the post made by the US Secretary of State Antony Blinken as Rwanda and the rest of the world remembers and honors the victims of that tragedy. Now quickly on to the details. On Tuesday in London, President Paul Kagame met with Prime Minister Rishi Sunak at 10 Downing Street. They discussed the productive bilateral cooperation that exists between the UK and Rwanda, including the impactful support that was provided in the aftermath of the genocide against the Tutsi and over the last 30 years. The two leaders also discussed the continued progress of the migration and economic development partnership. Now, as we just noted in the headlines, the Genocide Survivors Umbrella Organization, Ibuka, as well as researchers on the genocide against the Tutsi, have denounced the post made by the US Secretary of State Antony Blinken as Rwanda and the rest of the world remembers and honors the victims of the 1994 genocide that was perpetrated against the Tutsi in this country. The message on the platform now known as X read, and I quote, "The United States stands with the people of Rwanda during Kwibuka 30 in remembering the victims of genocide. We mourn the many thousands of Tutsis, Hutus, Twas, and others whose lives were lost during 100 days of unspeakable violence." End of quote. The message has triggered outrage not just among Rwandans but foreigners as well, with the French historian and author Hélène Dumas saying she has been saddened by the words. All point to the fact that as a senior US official, Antony Blinken should know better than to make remarks that seek to distort what actually happened here in Rwanda 3 decades ago. Recently, President Paul Kagame also noted that even though it has now been 30 years since the genocide against the Tutsi, there are still senior government officials and representatives of international organizations around the world that try to negate and deny that stain on the history of humanity.
In the letter, we told them, feel free to commemorate with us if you want. And feel free also to tell us whatever you don't like about us. But our ask is one. When it is the day of commemoration, which is 7th of April, can you be kind enough to commemorate with us and stop there? And there are 365 days in a year. Give us that day, the 7th of April, commemorate with us, and then you can have the rest 364 days blaming us every day for everything you don't like about us. Just separate these two things. Commemorate with us for one day, blame us for the rest of the days of the year. I thought it was a fair deal and a fair ask. So for me, that problem was solved that day. These others that come after and will come in the future, I have no problem.
In 2006, the International Criminal Tribunal for Rwanda acknowledged the fact that the genocide that occurred here in Rwanda was against the Tutsi, and in 2018, the UN changed the name of the International Day dedicated to the reflection of that tragedy to that end, calling it the International Day of Reflection on the 1994 genocide against the Tutsi in Rwanda. Now, lawyers and researchers on the genocide against the Tutsi have been expressing deep concerns over the proliferation of genocide ideologies in different countries around the world, particularly in some in this region. Adam Squizera with more.
Various youth and genocide researchers expressed concern that even 30 years after the genocide against Tutsi, there are still individuals engaging in genocide denial, often utilizing social media platforms to propagate genocide ideology.
Right now, on social medias, on TikTok, Twitter, Instagram, we can see so many posts that are racist and anti-Tutsi or denialist. It's really huge. It's important that we really take this fight seriously, and that every month, every week, every day, we try to find a new friend to come with us and fight on our sides.
Legal expert and lawyer Richard Disagara voices concern that the ideology of genocide persists not only among the perpetrators of the genocide against Tutsi, but also among some of the youth born after the genocide against Tutsi, and he believes that such ideologies should have to be addressed and prevented at an early stage. The only concerning issue is that for the genocide perpetrators to be denying genocide against Tutsi is not something new, but the issue is the way they start to manipulate that genocide ideology in the youth. But you can do something about it.
Le négationnisme ne date pas de 1994.
In a conference aimed at fostering intergenerational dialogue and addressing the theme of denialism, Minister of National Unity and Civic Engagement, Dr. Jean Damascene Bizimana, urged the youth to actively participate in fighting the spread of genocide ideology.
Iyo banditse tweet, kuki mwebwe mu twebwe nanjye nishyiremo, kuki tubura ngo mubabwire mutariko.
When they tweet, why can't we denounce that ideology they are spreading? We also have those documents that you can refer when denouncing them. We can't allow that spread of ideology after there's 30 years, after the unity we've built. That's why we don't have to allow anyone who wants to spread the genocide ideology.
Abo bantu bashaka kubigarura ntimugomba kubaha umwanya, ntimugomba kubyemera, ntibagomba kubatsinda namba.
Tous les écrits produits par les négationnistes.
Once again, these researchers and lawyers emphasize the role of the international community, which they believe continues to deliberately ignore the hate speech and spread of genocide ideology by certain government officials in the Democratic Republic of Congo. Adam Squizera, RwandaTV News.
Thank you, Adams. Now, representatives of countries and international organizations in Kenya have been calling on the international community to denounce hate speech and other forms of extremism that are based on discrimination that leads to genocidal atrocities. The remarks were made in Nairobi as the United Nations office there reflected on the 1994 genocide against the Tutsi. Prince Manzi with more.
This day in 1994,
the Director General of the United Nations office at Nairobi, Zainab Hawa Bangura, kicked off the event with reading the message of the United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres on the International Day of Reflection on the 1994 genocide against the Tutsi.
Today around the world, the darkest impulses of humanity are being awakened once more by the voices of extremism, division, and hate. So those who will seek to divide us, we must deliver a clear, unequivocal, and urgent message: never again. On this solemn day of remembrance, let's pledge to stand as one against all forms of hatred and discrimination. Let us ensure that the acts that began on April 7, 1994 are never forgotten, are never repeated anywhere.
His Excellency Martin Ngoga, the High Commissioner of Rwanda in Kenya, reiterated that they are perpetrators of the genocide against the Tutsi, living freely a hinder to justice.
Negationism can in no way be accepted as a tolerable opinion or a legitimate right. Genocide denial is a crime. It is for this reason that it must be fought by all means. Perpetrators and the deniers of the genocide against the Tutsi still continue to move freely in many parts of the world, spreading hate, ideology, and misinformation on the facts surrounding the genocide against the Tutsi on social media and the other media platforms. Some of these fugitives have had court judgments, have had warrants of arrest issued against them, but continue to be facilitated to evade justice.
In his remarks, the Principal Secretary of Foreign Affairs in the Kenyan Ministry of Foreign and Diaspora Affairs, Dr. Abraham Korir, demonstrated that Rwanda's development is a sign of strength in overcoming the horrors and grief and striving for the future.
Excellencies, we stand in respect and admiration of the survivors who, despite their circumstances, have worked tirelessly to rebuild Rwanda as we know it today. Their resolve, resilience, strength, courage, and fortitude is an inspiration to humanity.
The Principal Secretary also said that this was a time to reflect on the role of the Gacaca courts in providing conciliatory justice, and that resulted in the power to forgive and rebuild a new Rwanda free of divisionism. He assured that his country will continue to stand with Rwanda on its journey of development. The event also saw Rwandans, diplomats, and friends of Rwanda paying tribute to the innocent victims of the 1994 genocide against the Tutsi. Prince Manzi, RwandaTV News.
Thank you, Prince. Now, the French historian Dr. Alain Dumas has authored a profound work entitled Sans-ciel ni terre, which speaks about the testimonies of those who used to be children between the ages of 5 and 12 who endured the atrocities of the genocide against the Tutsi 30 years ago. Drawing from these first-hand accounts, experts in genocide literature affirm that Dumas' book embodies the comprehensive history of the children's experiences. Olive Nete with more.
Sans-ciel ni terre, without heaven or earth, by the French writer and historian Dr. Alain Dumas, is a profound exploration based on the first-hand testimonies of children who survived the genocide against the Tutsi in 1994. These children, aged between 5 and 12 at the time of the atrocities, bravely documented their experiences in 105 notebooks, initiating in 2006 through a collaboration with the Avega organization. Dr. Alain Dumas draws from various resources, including the archives of the former National Commission for the Fight Against Genocide, CNLG. She explains her motivations for undertaking such a significant project.
Il a fallu aussi beaucoup travailler la langue française.
We also had to work a lot on translating these testimonies into French. We just wanted to translate them originally and genuinely, as they were in Kinyarwanda. We decided to leave them as they were. We didn't want to write good French. We wanted to find a balance between the essence of the language, the way in which the children wrote their experiences, and the way to make it accessible in French. For reasons that are both scientific and ethical, these notebooks were not just a source of history. They were more of a way for these orphans to express what they were feeling. They would write the names of people they lost during the genocide. This went beyond what research could show. And for these reasons, I couldn't treat their notebooks as if they were just administrative papers I was reading. I took them so close to my heart. They were texts full of their emotions, expressing how they were affected. This book was initially written in French, but it is now being translated into English by Louisa Lombard, an associate professor of anthropology at Yale University. She chose to translate it because of its deeply emotional content, which allows readers to feel as though they are directly engaging with the children portrayed in the book.
This book is one of maybe a handful that I carry with me in a very deep way all the time. You read this book and it's not something that leaves you, it's something that marks you. And I think that one of the reasons why that is the case is that Hélène has managed to find a way to use the words of the children themselves and to provide some context so that people who maybe are not as familiar with Rwanda or people who are not of the same generation or era as the people who are writing are able to understand and feel the full force of these children's words. You know, I'm an academic, and we tend to want to have everything be about our interpretation and our argument and our take on things. And what Helene manages to do is to step back in her authorial role and instead let the children speak, so that you feel like you have met these young people. And they are incredible writers, incredible storytellers whose stories will mark you and will stay with you. And what we learn from this story of the genocide from the perspective, from the height of a child, is that children tell us things about genocide that we otherwise would not have known. They provide a vantage point to share things with us that otherwise would be completely overlooked.
The Minister of State in the Ministry of Youth and Arts, Mutoni Sandrine, commended the author for capturing the authentic emotions of the children who survived the genocide against the Tutsi in 1994. She emphasized the significance of translating the book into Kinyarwanda, underlining its importance for wider accessibility and resonance within Rwanda.
Les émotions des enfants, il n'y a pas de filtre.
There is no filter to children's emotions. They don't want to make it feel pretty. They don't intend to shock. Rather, they say it like it is. And I think that's where lies the beauty of the book. As Hélène said, I think it would be very important to have this book translated into Kinyarwanda so that we can hear these messages from these young people in Kinyarwanda as well. And if someone one day has the courage to go find these authors, to see where they are today, to see how they feel after seeing their history written into a book, I think it would be very important to see how far they have come since this work was done. Maybe it will allow us to have another dimension of this book. The book was initially published at the end of 2020, but today marks its first publication in Rwanda by the author. Its English version is scheduled for June 2024. Olive Nete, RTV News.
After running the length of Africa, a British extreme athlete has said that he only considered quitting once, and that was when he was kidnapped in the DRC by armed gangs with machetes. We have the details courtesy of Reuters and VOA.
This is the moment British extreme athlete Russ Cook finished running the entire length of Africa. He started nearly a year ago in South Africa and logged his final day of running in Tunisia on Sunday.
I knew it was going to be hard, but I knew I was also going into the unknown, so I had no idea really of how hard it was going to be, but it's safe to say that it surpassed all expectations. But there's obviously been a bunch of times where it was very difficult. Sahara Desert, sandstorms, and pushing that mileage up for the last couple of months was really tough as well. But got to get it done, and the only way out is the end.
Cook can pinpoint his toughest challenge. It wasn't being robbed at gunpoint in Angola or even being slammed by food poisoning. It was getting kidnapped in the Congo by a gang armed with machetes.
The scariest moment was in the Congo when I was on the back of a motorbike thinking I was about to die. Getting driven into the jungle. that was pretty nuts.
In the end, Cook ran nearly 10,000 miles and made it through 16 countries. The 27-year-old raised hundreds of thousands of dollars for charity and amassed a crowd of supporters who joined him for the trek's final leg. Blake Warren flew in from the U.S.
I saw the post on Instagram where he invited everyone out. I was laying on my couch. I literally got on Skyscanner. I looked for a ticket, and 20 minutes later I bought the ticket, and here I am. I just couldn't miss a crazy historic opportunity like this.
Cook says motivating others to get off the couch and get active is what his quest was ultimately all about.
It would be awesome to get people moving more. I'm a big believer in sport. Changed my life, so I'd love for more people to be, inspired or motivated to go out running or taking part in any kind of sport.
While enjoying a hard-earned rest is on the immediate to-do list, Cook says he isn't hanging up his running shoes just yet.
I've scratched the itch for a while, but I wouldn't be surprised if I start planning some more things in the pretty soon. I've got a whole list of ideas.
Now, before we go, let us once again take a look at the headlines. Rwanda's president and the UK's prime minister have met and agreed that a political solution must be found for the conflict in the eastern DRC. And the Genocide Survivors Umbrella Organization, Ibuka, as well as researchers on the genocide against the Tutsi, have denounced the post made by the U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken as Rwanda and the rest of the world remembers and honors the victims of that tragedy. We are always glad when you take the time to join us. I hope to see you again soon. Goodbye.